Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey people, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner pod with me, your host, Harry Symeou, coming to you a little bit later on this Friday because I figured that, seeing as I was going to Mikel Arteta's press conference today, it made more sense to just hold fire on the preview episode, listen to what the boss has to say, get the updates with regards to the team news and everything else, try and gauge what the mood is like within the camp, try and understand how Mikel Arteta sees the weekend's game. And then I felt I would be in a better position to bring you a more comprehensive and hopefully more accurate preview show. So here we are. That's what we've done. I've not long got back, probably about an hour ago. And there was some interesting nuggets from the manager today that we can delve into a little bit and we can discuss and we can talk around. We're also going to talk a little bit about Crystal Palace. What can we expect from Oliver Glasner's side? A lot of people predicted that having lost Eberechi Eze and having, of course, all the drama that went on with Mark Guéhi right up until deadline day, that was going to cause Palace problems. That was going to derail them. I would argue they've been brilliant so far this season, and I would argue they've done a wonderful job of making sure those things haven't had an impact on them. Will they prove to be problematic by the end of the season? You know, in terms of just that failure, I think, to add adequate cover considering the money that they brought in, maybe. And I know that they lost in what was a shock defeat to AEK Larnaca. Yes, big shout out to the Cypriot side, AEK Larnaca, who stunned Selhurst Park last night with a 1-0 win. But if I'm being honest, I'm not going to read into that game too much because I still think that we're going to face a very difficult, a very stubborn, a very well-drilled and a talented Crystal Palace side. So yeah, anyway, before we dive into it, quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, if you're a regular around here, you know exactly what you're going to get in terms of the content. So leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and give us one of those hype things. Apparently, you can hype videos now on YouTube, and that apparently makes a difference. So get involved with that if you can. Also, you can check us out on Patreon. If you are a patron, you'll get a bonus piece of content when we review the Crystal Palace match. So that'll be with you on Monday. Plus, you get access to our Patreon chat, as well as every single episode of the pod completely ad-free. And you'll be supporting me to continue the work here on the Chronicles of a Gooner. We will bring you some sort of instant reaction from Emirates Stadium after the game on Sunday, but that will be in audio-only format. So if you're a YouTube viewer, then you want to subscribe to the Chronicles of a Gooner on Apple, Spotify, or any other major podcast store, because otherwise you're missing out on some of the content. So go over and check that out if you can. Let's say a few hellos before we dive into the bulk of today's content. We've got Joaquin with us. We've got John. Krish likes the soundtrack. Love it. I'm glad that more people like it than don't like it. Laughing Man is with us. Andy, just in response to what Mikel Arteta had to say about Gabriel, and we'll come on to that in a bit more detail, says Mosquera or Nketiah to face Mateta then, rather not risk big Gabs. Adair has been a member today for 37 months. Thank you so much, mate, for your support of the podcast, of the channel. He says, cheers, H. Cheers, Chronicles of Gooner family. Feels good to be a Gooner these days. Come on, you Gunners. The Martinelli renaissance is upon us. John says, tasty questions, Harry. Loved his answers too. I'll come on to the press conference and specifically what was said and yeah, my reaction to it in a minute. I always want to stress this point because I always feel like when I come back from a press conference, I get loads of people going, why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that? Blah, 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 blah. Look, I don't get to go first. So I don't get to ask always the question that I really want to ask. Sometimes I go in there with a question, and by the time they get around to me, I've got to rethink on the spot another question. I knew today that I wanted to ask about Martin Zubimendi. That was the player that I went into the press conference thinking about. Because for me, Martin Zubimendi has been, did I say Zubimendi or Martinelli there? I don't even know what I just said. I should have said Zubimendi. I went into the press conference today wanting to ask about Zubimendi because maybe for my own personal selfish reasons, I've been very, very pleasantly surprised by what he's brought to the table since arriving at Arsenal, which is, of course, a good thing. Look, big hello to everyone who's in the live chat because we've got viewers from all around the world, which is amazing. But let's dive in first and foremost to Mikel Arteta's press conference, shall we? What did he have to say? I was supposed to... no, that's not what I want to do. Hold on a second. Stop screen sharing. There we go. And I want to share another screen. Again, Harry on the ball when it comes to the tech involved in this stuff. Here we go. That's not the setup I want, but no, that's not the one. That's the one. Is that the one? Anyway, every word from Mikel Arteta's pre-Palace presser, you can find it on arsenal.com. There is a transcript. You can obviously watch the press conference back as well on Haters TV's YouTube channel. But there were a few interesting bits that I wanted to pick out. First of all, on the latest team news following the win over Atletico Madrid. That was the very first question put to Mikel Arteta today. And he said not much, although Big Gabby had to leave the pitch with an issue in midweek, and he hasn't been able to train yet. So let's see how he evolves in the next 24 hours to see whether he's available or not for the weekend. Now, at this stage, I would not bet against Big Gabby being involved from the start against Crystal Palace at the weekend. I wouldn't bet against it. But at the same time, if there is a doubt and there is a concern about him, we are now in a position to deal with that. We are now in a position where we have adequate cover so as to not have to risk players. This is a really, really important game against Crystal Palace. Every single league game is. But I think now, for the first time in a long time, we can feel comfortable in our ability to backfill. And I think when we keep talking about the bigger squad and the ability that we now have to rotate and that we should rotate, and we discuss kind of what's too much rotation and what's too little, how does it look? I always think that sometimes it isn't even about changing your starting 11 every single week or leaving players out just for the sake of it. I think a lot of the time it is scenarios like this where you really feel the benefit of the squad. If you can get away with not playing Big Gabby and getting the result that you want, that is a real show of strength. Now, if you are Crystal Palace's set piece man, you would be buzzing at the news that Gabriel is a potential doubt, because Gabriel is a menace in those situations. He's an absolute monster in the air. He causes teams all sorts of problems, and nobody, to be quite frank, wants to defend against him. So if you are the set piece guy at Crystal Palace, you will be rubbing your hands together. But it does not mean what Mikel Arteta said, that Big Gabby is out. The thing is that he has not trained since the game on Wednesday. But seeing as we're playing on Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday would have been probably a recovery day anyway. Today might have been a day where they just didn't feel it was worth taking a risk. If he can get on the grass tomorrow at some point, then maybe he is going to be fine. I think once the season gets going, missing the odd day on the grass is not the end of the world, because there is so little recovery time between matches at the moment. I'd imagine that the level of intensity that they're hitting in those training sessions isn't actually that high. Therefore, if everybody else participates and you don't, you're not going to be behind per se. And also, how much fitness can you lose by missing one day of training? Do you see what I mean? So just because he didn't train today and he maybe didn't participate in a light session yesterday, if indeed that's what Arsenal did, it doesn't mean that he's out. But there is doubt and there is a question around him. If there is any question about whether or not it's safe for him to play, you leave him out. You play Christian Mosquera alongside William Saliba. That is a good enough pairing for me. There were questions put to Mikel Arteta with regards to some of the more longer-term absentees, Madueke, Odegaard, Havertz, and Jesus. He didn't commit to any dates, and he did make it clear that none of them are in contention to return in the next week or so, but he did say that they are all progressing really, really well. Now, there were quite a few questions in and among the press conference with regards to the whole set piece thing. And I had a little bit of a moan and a little bit of a complaint on yesterday's episode about how much is being made of this. It sounds like, though, this is still something that those in the media want to run with and want to ask about and want to keep highlighting and bringing up. And just from being there today, I could tell by Mikel Arteta's demeanor that he's sick and tired of those questions. He's sick and tired of having to answer to people about the way and the manner in which his team is scoring goals. And I thought it was quite interesting that he sort of said, I don't look at football in that way. I'm just trying to find if there's a comment on here. Look, on if he's concerned that we only have 5 goals from open play so far. And he says, no, not at all, because I don't see football like that. I don't see it as open play and set pieces. I see the game in a different way. And he sort of went on to expand a little bit about how, he doesn't view the two things as separate. He views it all as one game, one sport, one football. And whether or not he scores from set pieces or open play, I don't think he's really that bothered. He sort of, I think what he was trying to get at is we will do what we are good at. And if you don't like it, tough. I don't see it as us doing something that we shouldn't be. I don't see it as us doing something different. So stop asking me about it, because a goal is a goal. That's not what he said, but that was my kind of interpretation based on the words that came out of his mouth, but also his demeanor during that press conference. Each and every time somebody brought up the subject of, set pieces, is there any concern about, the lack of goals from open play, etc., etc. So I thought that was interesting. He also corrected Declan Rice on something that Declan Rice had said in the media not that long ago. We covered it on the podcast. We talked about it. Declan Rice, while on England duty, talked about having his role this season tweaked. And there was a question put to Mikel Arteta about Declan Rice's set piece capability. The comparisons that have been made by some between Declan Rice and David Beckham were brought up. And Mikel Arteta sort of sidelined the point that was being made about the set pieces specifically, and took the opportunity actually to correct something that Declan Rice said that he believes obviously was incorrect. He said, I heard some quotes that he made that this season his position has changed a little bit. And I disagree with that, because his position has evolved and he's becoming a total player. A total player has to be able to do as many things as possible, and he has the capacity to do that. So that's to evolve a player, to start to bring something else to the team. And especially when you talk about scoring goals, expecting the opposition goals, even better. And he's been instrumental in our improvement in that part of the game. So Mikel Arteta taking the opportunity, as I say, to correct what Declan Rice said. And he's basically making the point that I haven't turned him into a different player. I haven't, completely changed his role. I've asked him, and I'm working on him becoming a more all-encompassing player. And I think that's where Declan Rice's strength is. We've talked in the past about what an incredible athlete he is, and I stand by that. And I really do believe that that is probably his biggest strength. But it's his ability to do so many different things that makes Declan Rice the £100 million midfielder that we signed, that makes Declan Rice someone that gives you so much tactical flexibility, because you want him to sit and be part of a midfield pivot, a double pivot, no problem. He can do that. You want to leave him as the lone six, might not be the best ball progressor, it just in my opinion, but he can defend as well in that position as probably anybody in world football. You want to get him close to the opposition box and have him box crash, he can do that. You want him taking set pieces, he can do that. What you've got from Declan Rice now is a very, very well-rounded footballer. And there is that saying where people say, at times you can end up becoming a jack of all trades and a master of none. But I would argue that Declan Rice's level on so many of those things I've just mentioned is high enough that to call him a sort of jack of all trades and to use that term in a sort of demeaning way, I don't think is fair. I really don't. I asked a question about Martin Zubimendi. As I said, that was the player that I really wanted to focus on today as I walked into the press conference. And my question was, what is it that Martin Zubimendi has brought to your midfield specifically that maybe this team didn't have before? Now, I didn't mean that in a disrespectful way to those that had gone before him. It wasn't a dig at Jorginho or Partey, who were at the club previously. But I felt like Mikel Arteta was very wary of how he answered that question so as not to disrespect those guys. And he said, look, every player is different, and we've had some terrific midfielders here. He brings a certain composure that's very difficult for the opposition to understand. And then the way he processes information and learns from the game and what is actually happening in the game at that speed is remarkable. And I think, again, about him, it was about unlocking certain spaces and his capacity to look further and to hold the position when his teammates are further from the ball than himself. And then, yeah, if he can add goals to it, even better. He was then asked by myself if there's more to come from Zubimendi, to which he replied, a lot more. And the more he understands his teammates, their timing, and those relationships, I think we'll see another level from him. Now, if we break down the original answer on Martin Zubimendi, okay, so what are the things that he brings? He brings a composure that is clear for everybody to see. Always looks like he's got ages on the ball, doesn't really panic, always very, very comfortable in possession wherever he is on the pitch, regardless of what's going on around him. The way that he processes information, so the way he's come into Arsenal and been able to take on a whole new set of instructions and implement that in his game and show it off in his game has been incredible. The way he reacts to the game that he's involved in, so the way that he responds to what the opposition are doing, he's obviously a very high IQ footballer, which I think is really important. And when he says, I think it was about unlocking certain spaces and his capacity to look further, I think he was alluding to what Martin Zubimendi's been saying in a recent interview that he did during the international break, where he said, in the Premier League, it's more about when I get the ball, moving it forward through the lines quickly and early. And that's something that he's had to adapt and change with regards to his game. Because I'd imagine, and he sort of admitted this in a kind of roundabout way in that interview that I just referenced, when he was playing at Real Sociedad, when he won the ball back or when they won the ball back, it wasn't about how can I get us on the front foot really quickly, because that wasn't the way that they played. It was more about, right, we've won it back. My first step here is to ensure that I keep it, that I protect it, and that we can start to build from a solid foundation of possession. Whereas Arteta's instruction is not always that. Arteta's instruction a lot of the time is, as soon as you win it back, hit Saka, hit Martinelli, hit Gyökeres, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And that speaks to the directness that we've seen from Arsenal this season. And I always say and feel that that's been the kind of biggest tactical change that we've seen at the start of this new campaign. So those were the key points from the press conference. Remember, you can go and watch it back if you want on Haters TV on the YouTube channel. I think you might be able to watch it back on the Arsenal website as well. I think you can. Yeah, there's a little play button there, so you must be able to once you're logged in. And of course, you can read the transcript on arsenal.com or football.london or wherever. So go and check that out. Okay, we're going to take a really short pause. When we come back from that really short pause, we're going to focus a little bit on Sunday's opposition, Crystal Palace. What can we expect from them? How have they started their season? We'll get into all of that right after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner pod. Like and subscribe. Can we get up to 150 likes on the live? That would be amazing. Don't forget to do that hype the video thing as well, that people keep telling me is super important these days. Also, if you haven't done so already, leave us a review on whatever audio platform it is that you may be listening from. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Crystal Palace. They're 8th in the league at the moment. And when I watched their summer unfold the way it did, when I watched Eberechi Eze leave and join Arsenal, when I thought that Mark Gay was going to leave for Liverpool, I mean, he got to the stage where he even went to have the medical, I feared for them. I really, really did, because it felt to me like Oliver Glasner was having the kind of rug pulled out from underneath his feet. He's built this really good side. He's taken them to FA Cup glory. He's taken them to Europe. He's done so much, but at a club of that size, with all due respect, you're never really that far away from some of the big boys coming in and taking away your best talents. And the way that size of club, with all due respect to Crystal Palace, are able to, to remain competitive and remain in very respectable positions is that they need to be able to find ways of refreshing and renewing and replenishing effectively and very, very quickly as well. So they lost Eze, and you wondered, what was going to happen. But then you look at the way that Mateta's playing. And I know that they're not the same type of player. Mateta's a striker, Eze more of a creative, flary, attacking type midfielder. But in terms of just taking on that little bit extra responsibility to cope with that, Jean-Philippe Mateta has absolutely done that at the start of this season. I wondered if the uncertainty around Mark Gay, the fact that he was going to move, Crystal Palace pulled the plug because they couldn't get a replacement in. How was he going to respond? Was he going to be upset? Was he going to be difficult for Oliver Glasner? He hasn't been any of those things, but Oliver Glasner has come out for the purpose of clarity and said that he would not be signing a new Palace contract. And so he's going to leave on a free at the end of the season. But for now, he can stay focused. For now, he can focus on impressing, and he can focus on making sure he's got that spot in England's World Cup squad at the World Cup in the summer. So, there's a lot of incentive for Mark Gay to continue. And he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that would throw his toys out of the pram, that would disrespect people, or that would, essentially down tools at any given point. But with all that going on, I really expected a Palace drop-off. Palace started last season under Glasner really, really slowly and then found their groove. This season, I would argue, actually, they've started quite well and quite strongly. Arsenal have won 5 of their last 6 Premier League fixtures against Crystal Palace. The only game of that 6 that we didn't win was the 2-2 draw at Emirates Stadium last season, a game in which we dropped points. So this is another one of those fixtures where if you look at the reverse fixture last season, we lost points. Not lost, but lost points. And so, is that something that we're factoring into our conversations and into our build-up? I asked Mikel about that ahead of the Fulham game, and he said, well, we just got to do things different. He didn't really give me too much, if I'm honest. And I came away that day feeling like that was a bit of a waste of a question. Arsenal, obviously, going into the weekend, top of the pile. We've only lost 2 of the 70 home Premier League matches that we've played when we've started the day top of the table. So if you're looking for a bit of an omen, that might be it. We've not faced a shot on target in either of our last 2 Premier League games. So things that we can take encouragement from. But the reason I bring this up now, and the reason I've maybe just digressed slightly into the stats part, is because we haven't conceded shots on target. But Crystal Palace, interestingly, lead the way in the Premier League this season for shots on target. So it's going to be a test, isn't it, as to whether or not we can maintain that level of conceding very few, in fact, in a lot of cases, no shots on target against a side that are finding ways of getting those shots off regularly in this division. When I think about Crystal Palace, I think about their formation first and foremost, because I think Oliver Glasner's system, it works really, really well for them. The wing backs, the 3 centre backs, that double sort of pivot in midfield, and then the sort of little bit of more fluidity and flexibility that they've got in and around their centre forward as a result of that very solid base. I think there's going to be a focus on Eberechi Eze from Crystal Palace's point of view, right? Because they know him inside out. They probably know what his habits are. They know where he likes to drift. And so for me, there's a bit of work to be done at Arsenal with regards to ensuring that there's some unpredictability and perhaps some differences to Eberechi Eze's game. Differences that make it harder for Crystal Palace, who understand his previous better than anybody else, to stifle him and to figure him out. So that's going to be interesting. I think, again, I mentioned their defeat in Europe last night. For me, that has no bearing. They made changes. It has no bearing on what's going to happen at the weekend. There is a part of me that feels like Oliver Glasner's teams are built for these types of games more than any other type of game. It's why they've been so competitive against the big sides. It's why you always fancy them to cause the big teams problems. It's why, in my opinion, they went on to win the FA Cup, because they had this really functional system that in a one-off game can make your life very, very difficult. And it really does, not only in its kind of different interpretations and variations, attack the weaknesses of the opposition, but it also really kind of props up and enhances the strengths of some of Crystal Palace's players. I really, really do believe that. What I think is going to be really, really interesting to see now, whenever I watch Crystal Palace, and over the last few years, I've watched them a lot. I've covered a lot of their games with BBC London. I always find it astonishing how much work Munoz in that right wing position gets through. I always feel like he's the outlet. He's the one that's got that extra bit of license. And then you see the other three sort of the three centre backs kind of shuffle across, and Mitchell sort of tucks in at times as more of a conventional left back, so that Munoz can have that extra bit of license to get up that right hand side and cause the opposition problems. Now, if I take my Arsenal hat off for a minute and I think about this from a Crystal Palace perspective, one of the big decisions that Oliver Glasner has to make is how much freedom and how much license does he give Munoz? And you're probably thinking, why does that matter? Well, if Calafiori plays at left back for Arsenal, and I think he will, we know that he's not going to stay disciplined in terms of his positioning. We know that Ricardo Calafiori will go roaming. He'll come in field. He'll go down the line to support whoever it is that plays on the left flank. Ricardo Calafiori has this tendency to just pop up all over the place. And at times, and although we benefit from it in an attacking sense, he can leave us defensively vulnerable. So this feels like a bit of a game of chicken. And if I was Oliver Glasner, I would say to Munoz, you go and you stay high. You stay high. And let's see how Arsenal respond to that. Because away from home, against the top of the table team, you'd probably be expected to think that Crystal Palace would be the ones that back down, that compromise on the way that they normally play in the hope of achieving a result. If I'm Oliver Glasner, I'm going there and I'm saying, Daniel Munoz, you stay high and let's see what Calafiori does. Because if we pin Calafiori back, that's one less attacking headache that Arsenal are able to pose us with. But it also gives Crystal Palace an outlet, and it gives Crystal Palace an ability to hurt Arsenal from that side. We've always felt like Arsenal's left side has been the less secure side because of the flexibility and the freedom afforded to our players that play there. Calafiori is the embodiment of unpredictability and a sort of roaming type of player. So if I can find a way of forcing Calafiori to stay back, or if he doesn't, exposing the spaces that he leaves, I'm doing that if I'm the Crystal Palace boss. And that, I think, whether Glasner does that thing specifically or not, is going to tell us quite a bit about their intentions and whether they are so respectful of us that they don't feel that they can get away with it, or if they are coming there and they're going to play in a fearless way, which is what I've come to expect from Crystal Palace under this manager. So I think that battle really is going to be fascinating. Let's move on to starting 11. Look, we've talked a lot about Gabriel being a doubt. We talked a lot about how that defense is going to look in his absence. So what does Mikel Arteta do if the Brazilian is out? Now, it feels kind of obvious given his form at the start of the season. But for me, I am bringing in Christian Mosquera. I'm bringing in Mosquera. I think that's the right thing to do. I know there'll be a lot of people out there that say, yeah, but Gabby plays on the left-hand side. Would we not be better off playing Piero Hincapié? For me, he's not played enough to be thrown in from the start in a Premier League game like this against a side like Crystal Palace, who have lots of attacking threat. So I personally would avoid that. My backline looks like this: Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Mosquera, and Calafiori. Moving into the midfield, I would go with Rice and Zubimendi as that pairing that we've seen and that we're all really enjoying watching at the moment. Eze in the 10 role. On the right, I'm going Saka. Victor Gyökeres leads the line, fresh off the back of scoring twice in Europe. But on the left, which is another one of the decisions that Mikel Arteta has to make, I personally am bringing in Leandro Trossard. He's fresh, I think, against stubborn opposition. And I think we're going to face a back five at times, which means you're going to need guile. You're going to need creativity. We're going to need to see that cuteness and that intelligence. I think that Leandro Trossard's the guy to start this game. Maybe not necessarily to finish it, depending on the game state, but Trossard would be my guy. I've been very impressed with Leandro Trossard this season. I've been very impressed with Gabriel Martinelli as well. And it's funny how football works, because in the summer, if the right offer was on the table, I'd have probably sold any one of them. And it goes to show that, we don't always know best. In fact, I know I definitely don't always know best. And there's a lot of people that would tell you that as well. But I just think that's the team that I would like to see start for a few reasons. First of all, don't take a risk with Big Gabby if you don't have to, because we've got adequate cover. Secondly, Trossard feels like the right type of left-sided player for what we are going to face. I talked about it the other day. Martinelli's intensity is his superpower. And I don't think you get an opportunity really to show that when there isn't much space. And if you're talking about a team that will be in a back five shape a lot of the time out of possession, where are those spaces going to be? Even the half spaces that we focus on quite a lot when we're trying to figure out how to break opposition down, they're going to be more congested. They're going to be more crowded because they've got three centre halves. They can spread that a little bit wider and they can cover a wider sort of space. So, yeah, that's the team I would go with. Let me just repeat it very, very quickly for those of you listening on audio. Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Mosquera, and Calafiori across the back. Rice and Zubimendi with Eza in front of them as my midfield. Saka right, Trossard left, and Victor Gyökeres up front. In terms of my score prediction, I back Arsenal to keep another clean sheet. And so I'm going to go Arsenal 2, Crystal Palace 0. That is my prediction. Right, let me take a couple of your questions and your thoughts from the live chat before we sign out. So start getting those in. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. It really, really does help if you're with us on YouTube. If you're new to the channel, give it a subscribe. Or if you're not new to the channel, but you just haven't subscribed, and there's a lot of people in that boat for some reason, like the video and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. Those things really help. And for less than the price of a cup of coffee in London, you can become a Chronicles of a Gooner patron, meaning you'll get exclusive content after every single match that isn't available to anybody else. You get access to our Patreon chat, a direct line into me, plus you get every single episode of the podcast completely ad-free, which I know is a big deal to a lot of people. And you'll be helping me as a freelancer to dedicate more time to this podcast, which I love so dearly. So yeah, thanks for that. Let's dive into the chat box then. And take a couple of your comments before we sign out. Colton Perry, so much love for the theme tune, man. So much love. Colton says, hey, man, by the way, I love the new intro song. I catch myself singing it after every episode or podcast. It's catchy as hell. Who did you have do that up for you? So there was a very kind gentleman, a listener, who goes by the name. I'm just trying to find what his Instagram handle is. I know what his name is, but I'm trying to find what his Instagram handle is so that you guys can find him and go and follow his page. Hold on. Is there a search function on Instagram? Is that doable? Just trying to find it. Hold on. Is this the one? No, that's not. I'm just trying to find what his handle is. Anyway, I'll put his handle in the chat afterwards because I want to make sure that people go over and give him a follow because yeah, it's brilliant, man. It's really, really good. Hold on, just give me a second. I know those of you that aren't listening live are probably annoyed that I'm taking up time here, but I promise you, it's worth it. Still scrolling. There it is. Roxy Arms is the tag on Instagram. Roxy Harris, and his Instagram is Roxy Arms. Go over and give his page a follow. And he produces all sorts of music. And the amazing thing about this was I didn't even ask for it. It was just something that he took on the responsibility of doing. And when he sent it to me and I listened to it, I was like, this is fantastic. And the first time I listened to it, I was like, it's really good. But is it me? And then I listened to it like 3-4 times. And even my wife heard it from like a distance. She was like, oh, that's catchy. And I was like, bloody hell, it is, isn't it? Let's get it in there. And yeah, it's been a hit ever since. Let's take a couple more. More Than You Can Believe says, hi, Harry. What do you make of Eze's work rate? Against Fulham, it felt like he let players run off of him too easily. I think he's got to improve off the ball. I do feel that. And I think that that was always going to be the case with someone who was almost kind of protected in that Crystal Palace system, given a freedom, and then relied upon to provide that spark and that magic when he got on the ball. And Crystal Palace were quite happy for him to be a little bit less involved out of possession. When you hit that top level, when you join a club like Arsenal, who are vying and fighting for the game's biggest trophies, you're going to have to do more than that, because that alone is not good enough. So it's an adaptation for him, and it's something that he's got to grow in. I think I've never watched him and gone, you're really not working hard. I don't ever think it's been abundantly obvious, which means it isn't that bad. But at the same time, I kind of appreciate where your point is coming from, in that if I was going to say he needs to do something, this is, or he needs to fix something or improve on something, that's probably it. I tend to agree with you there. Steve said, if Big Gabby is out, I prefer Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. As you just said, Calafiori roams a lot, and it would be too much responsibility for Mosquera. It's an interesting point. It is a really, really interesting point, that. And I'll be honest with you, when I was mapping out my team on the screen just before we went live, and I'll just bring it up one more time. When I was mapping it out, there was a moment, a very brief moment, where I went, Mosquera and Calafiori together, do I like that? If it was, when it's Gabriel and Calafiori, that extra insurance that you get from Gabriel makes you feel more comfortable in letting Ricardo Calafiori go and do his thing. But when Gabriel's not there, and on top of that, Mosquera is playing on his wrong side, I can completely understand the concern. It's not as big a concern for me, but it definitely crossed my mind when I was mapping out the team. Just scrolling through. Andy says, what's Harry's go-to match day meal? A lot of the time now I cover the games as press, right? So it's whatever's in the press room. But before, it would vary, really. I'd go through phases. There's a good Greek spot just opposite the Armory now, in the car park behind. That's pretty good, which I highly rate. But I'll tell you what I used to really love, like back in the day. And I know it's not the most healthy meal and all the rest of it, but it just reminded me of when I was a kid and I used to go to football games with my dad. A good old-fashioned bag of chips with maybe a sausage and batter on top, loads of salt, loads of vinegar, and then a Ribena. And the reason I used to go and get that, and I used to get it from Golden Fish Bar outside Finsbury Park Station when I was younger with my dad, was because that just reminds me of Arsenal as a kid, and it's like a nostalgia thing. It's not even my favorite meal, like not even close, but there's just something about it. And that always used to make me go for that. So yeah, I mean, it started to change a little bit in recent years, but if you ask me what meal I associate with a match day, it would be that. It would be that. And that'll stay with me forever. DJ City says, how do we stop Mateta, who is on form and likes to score against the big teams? I feel like we shouldn't really obsess about the individual that we're coming up against. I feel like we've been able to, in the past, keep the likes of Erling Haaland quiet. We've been able to keep top players out. And that's because we haven't, I don't think, focused too much on those individuals. And instead, we focused on making sure that we defend well and we defend right as a collective. So I don't think I would sit and obsess necessarily about Jean-Philippe Mateta. I think that it's important that one of our centre-backs gets close to him, gets in his face, is tight to him, and the other just gives him a little bit of breathing room and is there to help out. Now, under normal circumstances, it would be Gabriel, the one that I'm asking to go and be tight and physical. And Saliba is the one that I look at as the safety net and the one that's a little bit calmer and a little bit more inclined to just take a step back and read the game before making his move and stepping in. But I wonder if it is the case that Mosquera starts, Saliba takes on that role of aggressor and Mosquera's the one that just drops off. That's going to be really interesting to see. But in answer to your question, I don't think we should obsess over Jean-Philippe Mateta, the individual. I think we just got to focus on sort of the collective defensive solidity and unity that we've shown. Title number 14 says, what food is in the press area? It depends, man. It varies every game. Sometimes it's lasagna, sometimes it's a Chinese style meal, sometimes it's a curry, sometimes it's a roast dinner, sometimes it's a breakfast. If it's an early game, it varies, man. You never know what you're going to get. It's like a rolling of dice. And that's the bad thing, by the way, because there are some meals that I go in there and I look at and I'm like, I don't really fancy that. And at that point, I'm like, I wish I could go back out now and get the meal that I want. But you can't. So you end up just having to, like, if you go for the press meal, you're rolling the dice and you're hoping that you get something that you fancy. Ian says, would you give up possession knowing that maybe on the counter attack and in transition and winning second balls would hurt Crystal Palace more rather than control possession? Again, I don't think we should veer away from what we normally do. And I think there are certain places, certain stadiums that you go to whereby people would argue that, we've chosen to let the opposition have more of the ball because it's part of our plan. But I would actually say no. Mikel Arteta's philosophy and overall ideology dictates that we try and have the ball as much as we can. And in the games where we don't have the ball much, it's not deliberate. It's something that we probably accept and embrace because we know that, we have other weapons and other ways of hurting people. But I really do think that Arteta wants his team to have the ball. And so I don't think in a game like this where the opposition, in my opinion, are incapable of showing that level of dominance at our place, I don't think we should deliberately give it up, in answer to your question. Okay, look, I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much to everyone for joining me on this episode. I know we're live at a totally different hour, totally different time. To all our regular listeners, sorry for the delay in getting the pod out, but as I explained at the top of the show, I thought it was worthwhile going to the press conference, hearing from the boss, getting those updates, and then we'd sort of do the preview after that. And wherever possible, I will try and do that. It's not always possible, but where I can, I will do that. Big thank you to you all. If anyone's interested in their Italian football, DAZN tonight, Milan versus Pisa. I'm on commentary duty, so you can join me for that one if you like. And of course, I'll be on BBC Radio London on Sunday as part of the commentary team for the London derby between Arsenal and Crystal Palace. So if you're looking for somewhere to listen to the game, there's nowhere better than the home of London football. Right, I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Up the Arsenal, and goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.